Good evening folks, 21st Century Caveman here. Hope everybody's safe, hope everybody's well. Sorry if I look as if I'm a bit orange today, but I've got the light on in the property and yeah, a bit of a glint coming off my forehead and my face. But anyway, so we're going to be fitting some hardware to the gate frame today. I'll reset the camera and I'll get back to you. Right folks, so this is a selection of some of the hardware we're going to be fitting to the gate. As you can see, we've got 3 hinges. They're called T-hinges, presumably because of the shape of the things. So they're from Wicks, heavy duty, 400mm. I've used these before, they're very good actually. In addition to that, I've got one of these hasp and staples. Once again, this is from Wicks. The screws that came with it are, I think, pretty sort of poor really, if I'm honest with you. They're not very long, I'm not sure how strong they are, which is a bit disappointing really, because this piece of kit itself looks as if it's a very heavy duty thing. I mean, it has actually been marketed as a heavy duty hasp and staple, so you know, I'm sure it's going to be absolutely fine. So look, anyway, let's cut to the chase. I'll be using my own screws. These are the screws that come with a hasp and staple, and these are the ones I'll be using. So as you can see, the ones I'm using, they're actually 40mm. These look as if they're about 30, so these are going to be longer. They're for outdoor use and they're going to be resistant to corrosion. There's a box that came in. I bought a couple of boxes. I don't need 400 of these screws, but they always come in handy, don't they? And it's always worth having them. And I had to wait a couple of days for these to come in stock. So these are outdoor screws then, and yeah, there we go. Look, it just gives you an idea as to what their suitable application is. So these should be absolutely spot on for the job we need. So I'm just going to reset the camera then, and then we'll start fixing these hinges. Right guys, so as mentioned in the earlier video, the key to this is to make sure that the hinges are on the same side as the bottom of the brace. So if not, it's not going to work basically. Well, it will, but not for very long. So I'll just secure this into position. Yeah, because these wobble around a little bit, look, I'm just making sure that the gap, which I can see down here, is the same all the way along. And as you can see, these screws fit nicely into these recesses here, and it's obviously helpful to have them in the same colour as the hardware. Another thing is you don't want to screw these too hard, because if not it'll just chew the wood up. Now, so over here then we can see that one of these holes is is pretty much over the joint. I'm going to put a screw in there anyway, but I'm also going to drill another hole. I don't know whether I've got the bit with me at the moment. I may or may not have. I'll have to have a look. But I'm going to screw another hole in there somewhere just to make sure we have the required amount of strength in this. Right, so the hinges have now been fixed and they appear to be nice and evenly spaced. Now I've actually decided to leave the hasp and staple until the thing's in situ, and then I can better gauge where to screw the thing down. It's whether or not I've got enough room on the timber which this is going to be connected to. Right folks, so the following day we're outside and it's a big day for the caveman because we're actually fixing the gate into place. Now one of the things you may find is the fact that the opening for the gate or a door may not be completely square. So in this particular example then, the gap at the top is about 10mm wider than the gap at the bottom. So in a situation like this where the opening isn't square, when you make up your frame you've always got to do it to the smallest measurement and then knock off 10 or 15mm for the hinges and to make sure that it opens. So here we're just lining things up, look, trying to make sure it's as level as possible and placing spacers in the most appropriate place in order to maintain the same consistent gap along one edge. Now I'm going to work particularly on the left hand side here, look where the hinges are. I want that gap to be as even and consistent as possible because I can actually make some adjustments on the other side of the gate when I fix the decking boards, because I have made the first or the top 4 of these a little bit longer just to cover up a little bit of the gap which is greater at the top than the bottom. Now as you can see, one of the problems is the fact that the concrete path, there's a bit of a slope on it, but that is something that can be dealt with without too much of a problem. I have already raised this framework about 10 or 15mm higher, but I don't want to raise it too much higher than that because if not it's going to look a little bit silly. So I'd rather basically sort out the concrete path and level that out rather than having to faff around too much with the frame. As far as I'm concerned, that's the most time consuming and the most difficult to sort out. So I've put a lot of time and effort into this. We're going to stick with the frame exactly as it is, and I did foresee that this might be a problem, but obviously I've made this knowing that I can actually remedy the situation with this path without too much hassle at all. Okay, but that'll be the subject of another video. So here then we're getting ready to fix the first horizontal decking board. So we're just making sure that it's nice and level, and as I've already mentioned, the first 4 decking boards have been cut about 5 or 10mm longer just to make sure that the larger gap on the opposite side to where the hinge is, just to make sure we can try and cover that as discreetly as possible. Now at this stage I was actually running very short of decking screws. In fact, I only had about sort of 30 left, and to do this job properly I would have needed about 50. So what I decided to do was just put 1 decking screw on each side of the decking boards just to secure them in place, and on the following day I would actually come back with some further screws and secure these properly. And by securing them properly we're going to have 3 screws on each end of the decking board, and we're also going to put one in the middle and attach it to the brace. So in order to get the right spacing for these boards, and I'm trying to match up with the fencing either side, I'm just using a spacer block
It's made of plywood, 18mm thick, and I'm just using this on each end just to make sure I get the right spacing. And the screws I'm using, incidentally, are 65mm timber deck decking screws, and obviously because they're decking screws, they're corrosion resistant. Now, a short while ago I was talking about the hasp and the staple, and I said that I was actually going to leave it until the gate was in situ, and that was a wise decision because we can see that the staple, the bit on the right hand side, is actually too big to fit on the timber support. So what I'm actually going to do then, I'm going to keep the hasp and staple, but I've already been to Wickes to pick up one of these sliding bolts, so we're going to use this one instead. Now this bolt does come with screws which are less than adequate in my mind, and also some bolts. Now I've deliberately decided not to use any of the bolts because, you know, these bolts, they never seem long enough. The screws, incidentally, as we can see here, look, they're far too short, so I'm using my own screws which I already know about. And the other reason I decided not to use the bolts was because where I'm putting this sliding bolt, as you can see, there is a joint there, there is an intersection between a couple of different bits, 3 different pieces of wood actually, and in order to maintain the strength and integrity of that join, I'm just going to use the screws instead. And I think what I'll also do actually, I've got a metal drill bit and I'm going to drill some additional holes on the metal plate here in order to put, you know, a few more screws in there just to make sure that it's as secure as it possibly can be. Now, as I previously mentioned, the fence and the gate, they're 1.5 metres high, so if somebody wants to get over them, there isn't going to be too much difficulty in doing that, is there? So, you know, we don't need any sort of, you know, really high security hardware on here. We just need something to lock the gate, just to keep the thing closed, just to provide a sort of a temporary obstacle to people just trying to look, really, to try and open it if you're not there. But obviously something which, you know, we can put a small padlock or something on there as well, just to keep it as secure as possible. And I will be putting another latch on this gate. They're out of stock from where I normally get them from anyway, but there will be a latch that goes on this anyway. And obviously these also add additional support for the gate. So this took me about 4 hours to sort out then, the other afternoon. It was an absolutely beautiful day, the sun was shining, the birds were singing, you know, I could smell people having barbecues in their gardens. There wasn't loads of noise, this is a very quiet area, you don't get lots of noise or domestic issues or anything like that. So it really was a lovely way to spend an afternoon. And when I left the house, around about tea time, I went home, had a bite to eat with Tina, and we had a glass of wine together, and it was a really nice end to a very nice day indeed. Very relaxing, very therapeutic. Now you will notice that there are some square holes where the bolts should have gone. So what I decided to do was just to put a a couple of screws in there right in the corners, just to make it less easy to detach, basically, just to make it harder to break. So the other thing I decided to do was just to put some galvanized L brackets on some of the 90-degree corners, just to sort of strengthen them really, and just to give them that additional support. So there we go, look, for the small amount of time and expense it cost, it was worth just strengthening these joints. Right folks, so there's the finished result there, and I'm personally very pleased indeed with that. I think it looks absolutely lovely, it looks nice and modern, and must say that I've actually had several people walking by, some were neighbours, some were people who I wasn't familiar with, you know, actually stopping to have a chat with me and saying how lovely this fence looked. And I've actually had a couple of people ask me whether or not I could do a similar thing for them. Now I work full time, so I just don't have that time at the moment, and also I've got enough projects of my own to keep me going, so I've obviously politely declined those invitations. So the next video then will be a Q&A session where I will answer any questions or queries which you may have about this build. So please leave your queries in the comments section below, and I'll also be addressing the issue of cost. How much did it cost for this build, and potentially how much money did it save? Thank you for watching. Take care. Bye bye.